Which Giants player is most likely to have a breakout season? Will the Giants pursue Aaron Judge if he reaches free agency next year, can't reach an extension with the Yankees prior to opening day? So we'll get to those questions and so many more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, we're going to dip into the mailbag again. We've got a lot of great questions, and let's just jump right in. First question comes from Mila, who asks, who do you think is the most likely player to have a breakout year for the Giants? And for me, I think I'm going to have to go with Thairo Estrada. I believe he's going to get a real opportunity to play a lot. He's someone who can move around the diamond, shortstop, second base, third base, outfield. And they really like him, and I think he has the potential to be good. There's a lot of contact in his game, and then for me, it's if he can hit for power, then there's really kind of the breakout potential. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but he's kind of a lesser known player right now around the league. And I think after this season, he has the potential to be, I don't know, Donovan Solano and then some. I know Solano was kind of a different type of player, and he had some really big moments, but I think Estrada, he's only 26 years old. He hasn't really had a full, real opportunity at the major league level, but I just like the mix of kind of athleticism and speed and newfound power. This guy hit 16 home runs in 102 games between AAA and the major leagues last year. We saw some of the power. He hit some monster home runs for the Giants, and he's going to get that shot. So I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but I think that moving forward, he could be a guy that we think of as a real key piece of the mix here in San Francisco. So some other possibilities, of course, I would say Joey Bart makes a lot of sense as a breakout possibility. He's long been considered a top prospect in the game ever since he was selected second overall in 2018. And he's going to get an opportunity, it looks like, this year. Although another mailbag question we have coming up is about the possibility of the Giants still making a move prior to opening day or maybe after opening day at the catcher position. This is obviously a position to follow closely in 2022 with Buster Posey having retired. So those are kind of my two guys. There's also like Elliot Ramos lurking at the upper levels of the minors. I think if he gets an opportunity, it would probably be at first a weak side of a platoon role where he's starting mostly against left-handed pitching. So that's why I'm kind of pumping the brakes a little bit on a breakout for Elliot Ramos in 2022, but it's not impossible. So Camilo Doval in the bullpen, did he break out last year? I would say he kind of did, but he has the potential to emerge as a frontline reliever in our game, like one of the best in the game. Notably, Gabe Kapler did say that Jake McGee would start the season like in a save situation. He would be the first guy they go to. I actually think that's smart because you don't want to just like give that role to a young, relatively unproven player. I think it's kind of wise to have it play out. Like if Jake McGee scuffles a little bit and Doval is just dealing in whatever role he's in, then you make that move. But I like the flexibility of kind of a fluid bullpen where there's no necessarily set roles and it just kind of fluctuates depending on who is delivering. So I would still look to him to have that kind of breakout year. Matthew Boyd could have a nice year once he comes back from the injury. So they have a lot of potential breakout guys, but there aren't that many that kind of jump off the page for me. Anyway, next question comes from Andrew, who says, Ben, great podcast. Thank you. two players I want your thoughts on. Is it worth making a deal for Cedric Mullins? Also, if the Yankees can't come to terms with Aaron Judge, would you go after him? So I think I answered this question on Twitter, but I'll get to it again now regarding Cedric Mullins. So Mullins just had this really nice breakout year for the Baltimore Orioles in 2021. Good outfield defender, hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases, exactly on the nose for each of those numbers. The issue that I have and why I don't think it's necessarily realistic is because this is not a player that the Orioles are going to be in a rush to move. He is under club control for the next 4 seasons. And so it would require a big haul. They would be asking for a lot. And there's no urgency for the Orioles to move him. And so for that reason, I just don't necessarily think it makes the most sense, especially when the Giants have their own outfielders coming up through the system. And they have a decent enough outfield right now. If they really wanted to add like impact right now and maintain space for their future outfielders coming up through their system, they could have just signed an outfielder to a shorter term deal. So I'm just not really sure it makes sense. He's a good player. I like Cedric Mullins, but I just don't really see the Giants like giving up really good prospects to get a guy like Cedric Mullins at this point in time. It doesn't totally make the most sense to me. And regarding Aaron Judge, he is an interesting case if he makes it to free agency. And he and Jose Ramirez are guys to watch right now as their respective teams are trying to work out extensions with them. And if those extensions cannot be reached by opening day, I think in both cases, then the players have said or indicated that they're not going to continue to negotiate during the season. So for Judge, this would mean that he's going to become a free agent at the end of the year. And for Ramirez, it would mean that he would go into next offseason with only 1 year of club control remaining, at which time the Guardians may very well look to move him. So we'll continue answering this question next, and why I do think Aaron Judge, if he makes it to free agency, makes a ton of sense for the San Francisco Giants. And we'll also get to so many more mailbag questions, including what are the Giants unwilling to do, like to the point where they're missing out on so many free agents, including Marcus Stroman, who had something to say about the Giants recruiting process from this offseason. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first, after months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national champion in the coming week. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. It's not just basketball. Baseball is covered there. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. I've actually got a bunch of Giants regular season props pulled up right here. We've got over-under on home runs for Mike Yastrzemski, 23.5. Over-under on Brandon Belt home runs, same thing. Longoria, 16.5. If that's still up, I might take the under given the injury. And we've got Brandon Crawford, Jock Peterson, Wade, Rodon, Webb, DeSclafani, all kinds of good stuff there at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, I want to continue talking about Aaron Judge a little bit and why he makes a lot of sense potentially for a team like the San Francisco Giants. I mean, you might be thinking, duh, really good player, superstar player, but there's even more to it than that. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Thanks for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Locked on MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, Aaron Judge, the point I wanted to make, he's going to turn 30 in April, so he's not one of these, 26-year-olds hitting the open market potentially, but he just put up he's consistently, like, to me, a guy who's going to be around 5 or 6 Fangraphs wins above replacement, so a real impact player. Durability has been a concern, and given his size, he's 6'7", 282, according to Fangraphs, so he's a monster of a human being. So I do have some durability concerns. He's also a good defensive right fielder, kind of surprisingly given his size. Although it looks like he may have taken some steps back in recent years. So maybe he's, given the size, I do have some decline issues and concerns. And if he's seeking a super long-term deal, that would give me pause. But the point I wanted to make is that he's from the area and grew up a Giants fan. And so there's a natural connection there. And so if you can give him anything close to like a fair deal, if he does reach the open market, then you actually have an advantage for a player like this. And so a lot of you are skeptical, I'm sure, that the Giants will ever land a big fish free agent. And I don't blame you. And I would kind of temper my expectations a little bit here. And so, but anyway, I mean, he is a real impact bat, and he likes the Giants. He's talked about, I think, saying he would love to play for the Giants someday, because he's got posters of Barry Bonds in his house today, currently. So anyway, would like to play here. We'll see. It'll be an intriguing story if he does make it to free agency. But if he doesn't get that extension done, like, that's something to watch with him and Jose Ramirez. There's about a week left, and if no extensions are reached, that puts them in play potentially for the Giants. With Jose Ramirez, it makes a trade either this summer or next offseason on the table if he can't reach an extension prior to opening day. So the next question comes from Mook Tumbo, who asks, what is it that the Giants are unwilling to do that other teams are in order to land top free agents? Is it the number of years we are willing to offer, or the average annual value? Or do we simply have a payroll cap given to us by ownership? Or do players simply not want to sign here? So, I mean, I don't know, right? Those are a lot of different possibilities, and they're all in play. One thing I do know is that when we look at the moves that the Giants made this offseason relative to the rest of the league, some of you have been following this show all offseason, and you know that I averaged the contract predictions of the top 50 free agents by MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and Fangraphs. All three of those sources predicted what everybody was going to get in free agency. And so I averaged the three sources, and I compared what they actually got to what the predictions were. And overall, players got 7% more years than predicted and 4% more average annual value, for a total of 9% more guaranteed money than predicted. The Giants came in with their free agent signings of top 50 players 7% fewer years than predicted. Again, the average overall was 7% more years. The Giants offered, or ended up giving, 9% more average annual value than predicted, and for a total of 0% more guaranteed money. So they ended up hitting the guaranteed money predictions, but it was done with fewer years and more average annual value. So if I had to guess, it's that they're offering fewer years, and that makes logical sense. We kind of have gathered that Farhan Zaidi and company don't really want to give out long-term deals, especially, for example, Kevin Gausman. I'm sure they would, if he was like, yeah, I'll take a 1-year deal, they would probably offer a pretty high average annual value for that. But given that he wanted and was going to get 5 years ultimately, and he said the Giants didn't even make him an offer. And for me, it has everything to do with the years. They just don't want to give out a 5-year deal to a starting pitcher. But then we look at Marcus Stroman, who actually ended up signing a 3-year, $71 million deal. To me, personally, I never thought that Stroman was the best of fits. He just doesn't strike enough people out for me. There's a little bit of more risk than I would have wanted. But anyway, he gets an average of $23.7 million a year over 3 years. So it's short term. And you would think the Giants would be all over a short-term deal, given what I just said, with Stroman not wanting to, or with the Giants not wanting to give out like a 5-year deal for Kevin Gausman. So Stroman actually said to Bob Nightingale of USA Today in an article that came out today, quote, "To be honest, I loved the Giants and everything about that organization. They were incredible. I was blown away. That organization is headed for great, great things. The people from top down are incredible. they're with it, man. And then he went on to say, I would love to play for the Giants someday. So they recruited him. It's clear from these statements by Marcus Stroman that the Giants made a pitch to him. It was, prior to the lockout, he says. So before they ended up signing Rodon. So I would guess it's not going to be about years with Stroman because he ended up getting 3 years. So the Giants probably were interested at 3 years. That makes sense. Like they clearly did make an offer to Stroman, but they didn't make one to Gausman. And it probably had everything to do with the fact that Stroman was open to a shorter term deal. And I don't know, maybe they just offered a little bit less money and he took as much as he could get. There's also an opt-out. Maybe the Giants didn't want him to have an opt-out after 2 years and $50 million. To me, it's a little bit of a bloated contract and there's risk potential. And I prefer Carlos Rodon. I prefer the 2 years, $44 million to Carlos Rodon versus 3 years, $71 million and $250, guaranteed with the opt-out. Actually, I mean, the whole thing is guaranteed, but it also has an opt-out. I prefer the Rodon contract to the Stroman one. So I think ultimately it's a little bit of both, but he was blown away, right? So I think that there's nothing wrong with the way that they're pitching free agents. It just hasn't worked out. And that's exactly what Farhan Zaidi said. He's like, because they were asked about the rumor that they wouldn't go north of $100 million for anyone. And he flatly said it wasn't true and that they have had conversations with players above that figure and it just hasn't worked out. And so I think Scherzer, again, because he was willing to be short-term given his age, I think they were in on Scherzer, but he ends up getting this crazy deal from the Mets, $43 million per year. I just don't think that they were willing to go that high. So I really kind of do think it's a mixture of all the different things you said. Some guys just don't want to be here. Some guys, they just get more average annual value from a more desperate team or a team just willing to overpay a little bit to get the player they want. And for some guys, certainly like Kevin Gausman, it's the years. So I wouldn't think that this necessarily means it'll never, ever happen, but it certainly has felt that way. I understand the question, and the Giants have been spurned over and over. There's Bryce Harper, there's John Lester, there was Giancarlo Stanton, and on and on and on, and we're just used to it now. So I don't know, someday they're going to get, a big fish, and maybe they do it by making a trade, and then the player doesn't have a choice. Like Jose Ramirez, potentially, if this extension talk with Cleveland doesn't end up progressing to the point where they get something done. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. A lot of people think I'm a little bit naive here, but I tend to take these statements like that they do make offers over $100 million at face value. And I think eventually they'll get guys they want. And they got some guys. They got Carlos Rodon. Offensively, they haven't made that big move. Jock Peterson, local guy, a la Aaron Judge. So we'll see. It's a year-by-year process. And with trades, you can always get guys you want without them having a choice generally. Unless they have a no-trade clause like Stanton did, and that's why he wasn't traded here. But that's a deal that I'm sure the Giants are thrilled they didn't have to take on. All right, so coming up next, why don't the Giants care about right-handed power hitters? LOL. That is the question that we are going to get to in a minute. All right, as promised, we are going to talk about why don't the Giants care about right-handed power hitters, and also the Patrick Bailey, Joey Bart conversation. We're going to have that one too. So yeah, the question comes from, who does it come from? Aaron, who says, why don't they care about right-handed power hitters? LOL. Well, my response to this is that the Giants got so much production out of right-handed power hitters that I don't even know where to begin when I'm talking about them. Hold on, I'm trying to pull up the Giants stats from last season. So they got a lot of underrated right-handed power hitters, right? Like Darin Ruf. The dude hit 16 home runs in 312 plate appearances. That's a 248 isolated power. League average is around 170. Okay. Austin Slater hits for a lot of power against left-handed pitching. Evan Longoria has hit for a lot of power against left-handed pitching. Wilmer Flores is an underrated right-handed power hitter. And Thairo Estrada, I mean, the dude had an isolated power over 200 And again, league average is about 170. Joey Bart is a right-handed power hitter. So I agree with Farhan Zaidi, who has said that their right-handed options are underrated. And that doesn't include guys like Jalen Davis, who has a lot of power, Elliot Ramos, who has power. And so Mauricio Dubon against left-handed pitching has power. And so, I mean, they led the National League in home runs. They hit the most home runs in franchise history, and people kind of still underrate their ability to hit for power. It wasn't all driven by Buster Posey and Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant did not hit a lot of home runs for the Giants. I got to scroll down. He hit 7 home runs. Okay, they hit, 241 as a team? Posey hit 18. So that's 25 between the two of them. How many did Solano hit? 7. So 32 home runs between the three of them. Jock Peterson in his best seasons can hit 30 by himself. And so I don't think that just because you lose those 3 guys, you're just going to go from leading the league in home runs to being last, right? I just don't buy that. Yeah, Jock Peterson has hit 25 home runs in his career 4 different times. 25 or more home runs 4 different times, including 36 in his second to last full season. In 2019, he had 36. And so I think that their power continues to be underrated. Not saying everything is going to go exactly like it went last year, so you can just like subtract the home runs by Posey and Bryant and Solano and then add 36 for Jock Peterson, and there you go. I'm not saying that, but it wasn't like Posey hit 50 home runs and Bryant hit 39, and then those 2 guys leave and you sign a bunch of guys who have never hit a home run in their lives. It's not like that at all. So we'll see. I think that the platoon system is underrated, and it may not be. I get that it's not as exciting as having Chris Bryant or Aaron Judge or Jose Ramirez or Giancarlo Stanton or Bryce Harper. I completely get that it's not as fun as a fan not to have those players to root for on your team. But at the same time, they're going to go out there and sneakily, everybody's going to hit like 10 to 25 home runs. And you got like 12 different guys doing that. And suddenly you've got a lot of home runs as a team. And that's the way it was last year. So anyway, we got to move on. But they're underrated, I'm telling you, with the power. So the next question comes from Juan, who asks, Patrick Bailey is obviously Farhan's type of catcher. And after a slow start last year, he finished off the year very strong and gained the team's confidence that they made the right choice drafting him. Do you think he's the catcher of the future over Bart? And then Dom asks, do you really think we could trade for another catcher, or is it a far-fetched pipe dream? So it's tough to say. I mean, they have depth at the catcher position in their system. Patrick Bailey definitely fits the mold a little bit more than Joey Bart. I've said this before, but I'm not sure that this regime would have drafted Joey Bart. There were other good players out there who were kind of more so known for their plate discipline and being more selective. Whereas Joey Bart, there were always questions about that. And they don't target that. Like Kevin Pillar is like one exception where they went out and specifically acquired a guy who is not good with plate discipline at all. And for Bart, it's a concern and a question mark. But Bailey, according to scouting reports, borders on passive. So he's much more, passive is its own problem, but Joey Bart is not passive. And so it depends. Like if Bart struggles, I would definitely push more towards saying Patrick Bailey will be the catcher of the future for this organization. But if Bart kind of breaks out and has a monster year, then Patrick Bailey becomes more of trade bait, I would say. So we'll see. So much is going to ride on this. And then the question of would they make a move at the catcher position? I still think the answer is yes. And I kind of felt like I was on a little bit of an island talking about how I thought that they could still make a move there and Wilson Contreras was someone worth thinking about acquiring. So I kind of backed off of that a little bit. And then suddenly I saw that Susan Slusser, Giants beat reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, went on KNBR recently and said she knew for a fact that the Giants were having conversations with other teams about catchers, including Wilson Contreras and Sean Murphy. And so that hit me hard. It's like, okay, well, if they're exploring that, it means they don't have a ton of confidence in Bart, or at least there's some doubt, which is normal. He hasn't proven himself, so of course you're going to have some doubt. But I think it's a possibility. You would have to do something with Bart because it would just devastate him and he would be very unhappy if you keep him and acquire another catcher like Wilson Contreras, because Bart really doesn't have anything much left to prove in the minors. So he would probably have to be a part of a deal, but that would be an overpay for 1 year of Wilson Contreras, in my opinion. So it's a little bit tough, but we'll see. I think that there's still time to make a significant move here with a week left before the season. And you just never know, and things could always change after the season starts as well. So there was a question about Curt Casali and how he's being underrated a little bit given the hand injury he had. He had surgery, and it affected him for much of the early part of the season. But yeah, I agree. He's an underrated offensive player, close to league average offensively in his career, certainly around league average offensively for a catcher, and he's a good defensive catcher. So I do think Curt Casali is, in fact, a little bit underrated, and he's a perfectly serviceable kind of secondary catcher on a team, and it's more of a timeshare. I think it's going to be 60-40 at this point, perhaps, with Bart and Casali, and adjustments, of course, as performance dictates. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to get a fresh set of mailbag questions as well. I know a lot has kind of happened in the last week with these injuries, and people have additional kind of new questions, and we'll get to those tomorrow. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the majors, past and present. That show is called Locked On MLB, and it's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.